Have you ever been in the middle of a perfectly ordinary day, maybe sitting in traffic or listening to someone complain about a trivial problem for the 100th time, when suddenly an unexplainable sensation washes over you? You are still physically present. Your face is reacting exactly on cue, and the repetitive cycles of daily life continue to spin perfectly on schedule. But psychologically, a massive quiet distance has just opened up between you and everything happening around you. The artificial urgencies, the social dramas, and the frantic noise of modern society suddenly lose their gravitational pull. For the very first time, you are no longer fully absorbed by the routine. You catch yourself watching the pattern play out instead of blindly living it. If you have experienced this strange detachment lately, understand that you are not dissociating and you are not losing your drive. What you are experiencing is an undeniable psychological shift. You have officially reached the edge of the board. Welcome to the final stage. This is exactly what happens right before you permanently exit the illusion. Most people will spend their entire lives hypnotized by the script they were handed at birth. But when you hit this specific threshold, pure consciousness silently infiltrates the space that used to be completely controlled by automatic habit. The invisible strings holding you to the game are finally starting to snap. In this video, we are going to decode the exact anatomy of this final transition. We will expose the desperate defense mechanisms your own mind will trigger to pull you back to sleep, the profound exhaustion of dropping your fabricated character, and the definitive point of no return that permanently severs your connection to the system. The irreversible process of your exit has officially begun. There is a massive psychological trap hiding in the way we think about awakening. If you examine how human beings conceptualize the act of finally breaking free, you will notice we always treat it like a cinematic climax. We have been deeply conditioned by modern culture and spiritual rhetoric to expect that escaping the system requires an earth-shattering event. We subconsciously wait for a dramatic collapse of our reality, a sudden blinding flash of cosmic clarity, or a mystical experience where the fabric of the universe tears open. We are convinced that leaving the simulation must feel like a spectacular explosion. Let us completely shatter that bias right now. Waiting for a grand finale is the exact mechanism the system uses to keep you trapped in the audience, looking for an exit that does not exist. The absolute threshold of your freedom, the exact moment the illusion begins to fail, is completely devoid of drama. In fact, it is painfully, aggressively ordinary. It does not happen on an isolated mountaintop during a meditative trance. It sneaks in on a completely random Tuesday. You might be staring at your steering wheel in morning gridlock, standing blankly in the kitchen waiting for water to boil, or nodding along as a coworker complains about the exact same trivial problem for the 100th time. Everything in your external environment is entirely normal, but right in the middle of the mundane, an invisible and permanent shift occurs. You feel a strange, quiet distance open up between you and the world. The physical reality around you does not dissolve. The traffic is still moving, people are still rushing to meet their artificial deadlines, and the repetitive cycles of daily life continue to spin exactly as they did yesterday. The demands of your routine carry the same weight they always have, but for the very first time you are no longer absorbed by them. You are still physically present in the room. Your mouth might even be forming the polite words expected in a conversation, but your psychological investment has entirely evaporated. The dense gravity that used to violently pull you into the everyday chaos simply stops working. This is the exact instant where pure consciousness silently infiltrates the space that used to be occupied by mechanical habit. Up until this point, you were living entirely inside the script. You panicked when society told you to panic. You felt urgency when the system demanded urgency. You reacted precisely on cue, confusing your conditioned responses for your actual personality. But now, standing on this threshold, you catch yourself watching the pattern instead of blindly living it. You are no longer the actor lost in the drama of the scene. You have unexpectedly become the audience, observing your own performance. You look at the anxieties that used to keep you up at night, the societal pressures that dictated your self-worth, and the relentless chase for the next milestone, and none of it sticks to your mind anymore. It all suddenly looks incredibly fragile, like cheap wooden props on a stage. This profound detachment is the true hallmark of the final stage. Once this gap between you and your environment opens, the irreversible process of stepping out has officially begun. You can never unsee the mechanical nature of the game. The hypnotic spell of the routine is broken, not because the routine stopped, but because your blind participation in it did. However, as you stand in this newfound stillness, an unsettling realization is about to surface. Because as you look around for the walls of this maze, you are preparing to escape, expecting to find the external forces that kept you trapped all these years. You're about to discover a deeply uncomfortable truth about where the real bars of this cage have been hiding all along. As this quiet detachment settles over you, a very predictable human instinct kicks in. You naturally begin to look around for the boundaries of the cage. For your entire life, the narrative of liberation has been framed as an epic battle against tangible external forces. We have been deeply conditioned to believe that the trap holding us back is physical, structural, and existing entirely outside of ourselves. When we first realize something is profoundly wrong with the world, our immediate reaction is to point our fingers at the obvious architects of our misery. We blame governments, the relentless manipulation of digital algorithms, the glowing screens that consume our waking hours, and the suffocating demands of modern society. We convince ourselves that if we could just disconnect from the grid, move far away, or dismantle these oppressive power structures, we would finally taste true freedom. We spend decades fighting a fierce outward war, trying to escape a fortress we firmly believe is holding us hostage. But as you stand on the threshold of the final stage, observing the machinery of your existence with this newfound clarity, a staggering and deeply humbling revelation washes over you. You reach out to push against the imposing walls of your prison, and your hand passes right through thin air. There are no walls. There is no physical lock to pick. The grand architecture of the illusion was never built around you. It was built entirely inside of you. The terrifying genius of the control system is that it operates with almost zero friction. It never actually needed to deploy physical guards to dictate your behavior, nor did it need to chain you to your daily obligations. It achieved total dominance by simply outsourcing the grueling labor of your imprisonment to your own mind. From the moment you were born, you quietly absorbed an invisible rulebook. You internalized the crushing weight of societal expectations, the desperate need for external validation, and the paralyzing terror of not being enough. You allowed the external world to upload a psychological operating system designed to keep you endlessly running on a treadmill of dissatisfaction. And tragically, you accepted it as your own identity. The most ruthless weapon of this internal control structure is the subtle, everyday tyranny of the words, "I should." I should be much more successful by now. I should care about this trivial social drama because everyone else does. I should feel intensely guilty for resting when I could be productive. I should meticulously edit my personality so others will accept me. These invisible commands dictate your choices, keeping your energy drained and your focus trapped in a fabricated reality. The system did not need to oppress you with brute force. It merely handed you the blueprint, and you meticulously built the labyrinth yourself. This is the ultimate confrontation required before you can ever hope to actually cross the threshold and exit. You must come face to face with the deeply uncomfortable reality that the jailer and the prisoner are breathing through the exact same lungs. The external world only ever provided the raw materials, the opinions, the breaking news, the cultural trends, the manufactured fears. But it was your own mind that took those materials and did all the heavy lifting. You unknowingly used the mortar of self-doubt, the bricks of chronic anxiety, and the iron bars of relentless overthinking to construct the cell you have been living in. Accepting this intimate self-sabotage is the absolute, non-negotiable prerequisite for true liberation. You cannot pack your bags and geographically run away from a prison you carry inside your own skull. Once you finally recognize that you are the ruthless warden of your own suffering, the structure instantly loses its integrity. However, the human ego is a highly sophisticated survival machine, and it does not surrender its acquired territory without a vicious fight. The exact moment you stop enforcing these internal rules, a strange silence descends, And it is within this exact silence that the psychological structure realizes you are about to walk out the open door. Recognizing the imminent collapse of everything it has ever known, your own mind is about to trigger a desperate alarm, launching its most aggressive defense mechanism, yet to drag you right back into the noise. When you finally realize the prison is internal, the logical next step is to simply stop building its walls. You attempt to pause, take a breath, and finally sit in genuine stillness. But the very second you step away from the relentless momentum of your routine, psychological chaos erupts. The illusion cannot survive in silence because silence breeds observation, and observation is fundamentally fatal to its existence. To prevent the internal structure from collapsing, your own brain initiates an aggressive emergency protocol, bombarding you with a weaponized stream of noise. This is a mechanical reflex you can test in real time. Your practice for this stage is not about meditating for hours or retreating to the woods. It is about actively hunting the system in the micro gaps of your day. The next time you are standing in an elevator, waiting in a line, or sitting in your parked car before turning the engine off, deliberately choose not to reach for a distraction. Just hold the empty space for 60 seconds. Almost instantaneously, your mind will fabricate an overwhelming sense of urgency. You will suddenly remember a message you supposedly must reply to right this second. A wave of unexplained anxiety will wash over you, whispering that you are forgetting something crucial. You will feel a suffocating guilt for not being productive, as if simply existing without doing something is a punishable offense. If you pay close attention, you will even notice a physical manifestation of this panic, a phantom itch in your hands. It is a desperate, involuntary craving to reach into your pocket, grab a screen, and plunge right back into the digital chaos. This is not you wanting to be entertained. This is your conditioned mind fighting for its survival, masterfully disguising its terror of silence as a genuine need for connection. If you have ever felt that exact phantom urge to grab your phone just to avoid sitting alone with your own presence, I want you to drop down to the comments and type the phrase, "The noise is a trap." I am not asking you to do this to satisfy some metric or to warm up an algorithm. I ask because it is deeply validating to establish a genuine connection, to look down and see how many of us are silently fighting this exact same invisible battle. And as we continue to expose these psychological traps together, make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you do not have to navigate this disorientation alone. Understanding this frantic internal resistance changes everything. When you actively catch your brain begging for stimulation during those microgaps, you step out of the role of the captive and become the observer. You realize that compulsive scrolling, the need for constant background noise, and the endless mental rehearsing of future conversations are highly calculated defense mechanisms. The system knows that if it keeps your attention completely fragmented and pointed outward, you will never have the focus required to dismantle the final locks. Holding your ground through this barrage of mental noise requires immense psychological energy. Refusing to give in to the desperate pleas for distraction means fighting against the very current of your conditioned self. As you stand firm, the false urgencies slowly begin to lose their grip, and the internal panic eventually burns itself out. Yet surviving this intense rebellion leaves an unexpected mark. As the noise finally fades, you do not feel instantly enlightened. Instead, you are hit with a profound, bone-deep weariness, bringing you face to face with the silent exhaustion of maintaining a character you never actually chose to be. As the frantic noise of the mind's defense mechanism finally begins to subside, it does not leave you feeling victorious or instantly energized. Instead, as the dust settles on the threshold of your exit, you are hit with a profound, almost paralyzing weariness. This is not the familiar type of exhaustion that comes from intense physical labor or missing a few hours of sleep. It is a deep psychological fatigue, a heavy aching in the very core of your being. It is the accumulated toll of a lifetime spent pretending. Right before you break free from the illusion, the immense weight of maintaining appearances becomes emotionally unendurable. For the very first time, you become hyper-aware of a relentless presence inside your own head, an entity we might call the inner watchman. This watchman has been your constant companion since childhood. It is the internal sensor that tirelessly scans every room to gauge the mood, meticulously edits your authentic feelings before they are ever allowed to reach your mouth, and forcefully suppresses any spontaneous impulse that might disrupt the delicate social harmony. It is the demanding voice that dictates exactly how you should laugh at a joke you do not find funny, how you must feign genuine interest in utterly hollow conversations, and how you need to constantly adjust your personality to be palatable to whoever happens to be standing in front of you. You realize with staggering clarity that you have spent your entire existence performing for a completely imaginary audience. You have been playing a highly curated character, wearing a heavily constructed psychological mask designed entirely out of borrowed opinions, inherited fears, and the desperate desire to belong. The absolute tragedy of the inner watchman is not just that it forced you to act, it is that it demanded an astronomical amount of your vital life force to keep the act going. Holding up that heavy mask day after day requires continuous, invisible, and draining labor. The bone-deep fatigue you feel at this stage is simply the sudden realization of how much sheer effort it takes to artificially inflate a persona that was never real to begin with. You have been running a marathon every single day without ever leaving your own mind. When you finally stand on the edge of truly waking up, the energy required to sustain this fabricated character completely evaporates. You simply cannot do it anymore. The prospect of attending a social gathering and engaging in performative small talk suddenly feels as agonizing as climbing a mountain. The idea of carefully managing other people's perceptions of you seems utterly absurd. You completely lose all motivation to fiercely defend your fragile ego or to prove your worth to a society whose metrics of success you no longer respect. This total collapse of the character is deeply unsettling to witness. To the outside world, you might suddenly appear withdrawn or shockingly apathetic. Friends and colleagues might ask if you are okay, completely misinterpreting your sudden lack of performative enthusiasm as a form of sadness. But it is not sadness. It is the purest, most unfiltered form of relief. It is the absolute surrender of the heavy armor you were so deeply convinced you needed to survive. Letting the character die is a beautiful process that strips away everything you are not, leaving only the quiet truth of your existence. Yet, as your old identity falls away and you finally see the mechanics of the game for what they truly are, a dangerous new impulse arises. This newfound clarity can be incredibly isolating, and the stark contrast between your quiet waking state and the loud slumber of the world around you is about to pull you toward one of the final and most deceptive traps of the entire journey. As the exhausting weight of your fabricated identity drops, you're left in a state of quiet, unfiltered relief. Your vision adjusts to this newly emptied psychological landscape, and you look around with absolute clarity. You watch the people you love, your friends, your family, your co-workers, and you can plainly see the invisible strings dictating their movements. You see them agonizing over manufactured dramas and suffering deeply under rules that do not actually exist. Because you have just tasted the lightness of stepping outside the script, a powerful urge rises in your chest. The stark contrast between your internal silence and their frantic sleepwalking creates a sharp pang of isolation. To bridge that lonely gap, your instinct is to grab them by the shoulders, shake them awake, and show them that the cage door has been open all along. But right here, we need to aggressively shatter one of the most dangerous and heavily romanticized biases of the awakening journey. We have been conditioned by endless cinematic narratives and spiritual metaphors to believe that discovering the truth automatically deputizes us as the saviors of the masses. We want to believe that escaping the illusion gives us the moral mandate to rescue our social circle from the dark. We view this urge to intervene as an act of profound empathy. But let me be brutally honest, it is not empathy. It is the penultimate trap of the control system. When you forcefully attempt to project your clarity onto someone deeply invested in their slumber, you do not liberate them. You trigger their deepest psychological defense mechanisms. To their conditioned mind, you are not offering freedom, you are threatening their emotional survival. They will become hostile and pull away. But the true danger is what quietly happens to you in the process. By positioning yourself as the enlightened guide and viewing everyone else as oblivious sleepers, you unknowingly rebuild the exact same hierarchical structure of control You just tried to escape. The ego is a brilliant master of disguise. When it realizes it can no longer survive by playing the anxious conformist, it quickly changes its wardrobe. It assumes the shiny, self-righteous mask of the awakened martyr. It realizes it can still feel superior and in control, as long as it focuses entirely on managing other people's reality. You are not out of the game at all. You have just convinced yourself you are playing on a morally superior level. To actually finalize your exit, you must deliberately break this savior bias and pass the agonizing test of isolation. This requires the emotional maturity to sit at a crowded dinner table, quietly listening to people argue intensely over the rules of a game you no longer play, and simply letting them be. You must honor the sovereign right of every individual to remain asleep, accepting that their suffering is often the friction required for their own realization. You cannot forcefully bypass their journey just because their sleepwalking makes you feel profoundly lonely. Surrendering this desperate need to change the external world is the ultimate test of your readiness. As you finally learn to bear the heavy, quiet solitude of your own clarity without reacting, the interpersonal friction dissolves. The overwhelming urge to preach completely fades. You stop fighting the dreamers and bring your entire focus back to your own mind. And in that posture of total surrender, you finally arrive at the absolute edge of the precipice. Empty of the need to save the world, you step into the fleeting millisecond right before the door opens, where a single, definitive shift in your perception will permanently sever the final chord. Let us finally shatter the greatest myth about the exit. We are conditioned to believe that escaping the illusion teleports you to a mystical dimension where all your problems magically vanish. That is pure fiction. Tomorrow morning, you will still wake up, wash the dishes, go to work, and face everyday human disappointments. The external scenery of your life remains exactly the same. The colossal difference is that the suffocating psychological density has entirely evaporated. You no longer move through the world driven by fear, blind reactivity, or anxiety. You now operate from a place of clear, grounded presence. The mechanical gears of the system will continue to spin loudly all around you, but the ultimate triumph is that they no longer spin inside of you. You are still walking through the game, but you are completely untouched by its gravity. You are, finally, free. If you made it to the very end of this video, drop down to the comments and type the phrase, "The system ends with me." This lets me know exactly who is committed to the journey and stayed until the final stage. If you like this content and want more videos just like this, to help you navigate the noise, click on one of the videos appearing on your screen right now. And if you want to directly support the channel while gaining access to exclusive content, consider clicking the Join button to become a member. I will see you in the next one.